The Ravnica Vacation event has just started on Magic Arena, and it does involve 10 different decks. How do you know which deck you want to choose? Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here today to talk about the Ravnica staycation, really, because I mean, you're staying in your house at the end of the day. That's what's going down. So it's a brand new arena event. Now, here's how it works. It's short time, okay? The previous events they did like this, they lasted for a full week. This event's going from Sunday till Tuesday. So you only got 3 days to do it. And admittedly, when they originally said they were going to shorten the events, I thought that meant we would get them back to back. But they're just shortening the events with nothing in between them, which seems almost like a way of trying to limit your chances of getting some experience levels. And I gotta say, I don't like that. But that's the only thing that I don't like about this event. So how the event works overall, there are 10 guilds in Ravnica, right? Well, there are 10 different decks for the Ravnican guilds. You can pick whichever one you want and face off with it. And you can change the decks that you're using. So you can be like, I'm gonna play Golgari. No, you know what, I'm gonna play Boros. No, you know what, I'm gonna play Celestia. And unlike other events, it doesn't keep track of your losses. So it doesn't matter how many times you lose. Each time you win, you're going to be given special basic land art. And I'm going to, once we're done this little preamble chat here, I'm gonna dive into actually going over each of the decks, showing you the contents of them, talking about the basic philosophy behind the deck, and I'm going to rank them based on my personal preferences and biases, basically. So what I want you to bear in mind is I am not somebody who plays insanely competitive Magic all the time. So I am not a meta master where I'm deeply involved in playing standard and I know the absolute ins and outs of every single deck. Most of the time, what I do is play a giant green tower deck. That's what I play, 160 card green deck, and I play a lot of the time in unranked because I'm looking to have zany fun games. Now today, I'm going to be over on Twitch playing all of these different decks off against each other, enjoying the event. I'm also going to be acquiring my Mastery Pass as well so that I can evaluate that, although that will be for a future video. So I say, come on over to my Twitch and we will see how my opinions have stacked up. But that being said, let us dive into the description of the different decks and we will evaluate which ones appear on the surface without having been played with. We will see which ones seem most likely to give you a good chance of winning. All right, well, to quickly go over the event itself, in case you're not aware of the context, you select one of these decks here and you try and win with them against other people playing the same decks. So for the first win, you end up netting a basic land and 1,000 experience points. Each level just gives you another basic land up until you get to the point where you reach the unhinged full art lands. In all honesty, these rewards, I guess it's just you get a different basic land artwork. It's admittedly a little underwhelming for that, but the level up plus the full art unhinged forest, those are attractive to me. Now, let's take a look at the actual event decks themselves. So in my opinion, after having looked over all these decks, I actually feel like the majority of the strongest decks are the ones with black in them. So for the Golgari deck here, basically the idea behind this deck is you don't really care about how many creatures you feed into your graveyard because you thrive off of feeding things into your graveyard. You have multiple cards that actually care about cards being in your graveyard. You've got Kraul Harpooner, which can take out gigantic flyers depending on how many creatures in your graveyard. So you've got that kind of a scenario. You have creatures like the Rhizome Lurcher here, who get a number of +1/+1 counters equal to the number of creatures in your graveyard. You have cards that will feed stuff into your graveyard, like the Glowspore Shaman. You've got your Find Broker, which will grab stuff out of your graveyard. You've got some creature destruction in the form of Death Sprout and Plague Crafter. Now, obviously, since you're feeding stuff into your graveyard like a crazy person anyways, it doesn't really matter about the Plague Crafter forcing you to sack a creature as well. And that artwork is actually really nice. Anyhow, you've got other cards like Kraul Forager that'll give you a bunch of life from the creature cards in your graveyard. And then one of your big swing deals will be this right here, Izoni Thousand Eyes, who makes a ton of 1/1 tokens for you based on how many creatures you already have in your graveyard and lets you feed more creatures into your graveyard. So those are the ones that are really going to help tie into the theme. Overall, compared to the other decks, this Golgari deck seems like one of the better decks. I like it. And it does come with an Assassin's Trophy, which can actually be used to take out any permanent that's giving you a problem at the cost of giving your opponent a basic land, which is a fine trade. So overall, I rank this as one of actually the better decks that are available. Then we've got the Cult of Rakdos deck. Now this one's built around Spectacle, so you've got Skewer the Critics and Light Up the Stage and Hack Robat based on the Spectacle concept. In terms of burn, you've got Skewer the Critics. You've also got some Shocks, which are nice. And you've got Judith. This Judith is something that's really going to make the deck work well overall. But I think that, I don't know, I just feel like the power level of this deck is okay. This one didn't really jump out at me as something amazing. It can handle a fair number of creatures. Between the burns, the bedevil, and the get the point, it does give you the ability to handle a lot of creature destruction. So it does have that going for it. But of the decks I looked at, this one felt a little more scattered. Now, again, bear in mind, as I said before, this is me evaluating the decks before I've had a chance to play with them. After that, we've got the Simic Combine deck. This one is all about +1/+1 counters. This is about putting +1/+1 counters on your creatures. A lot of adaptation. This deck I found to be actually fairly underwhelming. The Hydroid Krasis is a very nice card, but at the end of the day, all the decks have ways to easily handle it, so I don't think you're going to get too far with it unless you get lucky. And as an added note, I never really paid that much attention to the artwork on Zegana, but what's the deal with Zegana? Is Zegana a lady? She's got a really weird outfit on. Is this a dude or a lady? I look at it and go, yeah, I'm just moving on. Anyways, this deck feels like one of the lower rated decks. Honestly, I think that the most successful decks are going to be the black themed decks overall, but again, it is going to be a matter of taste as well. It depends on what you like playing. This Celestia deck feels like one of the worst decks to me. This definitely feels like one of the worst decks. It has some nice cards in terms of Mulch of the Multitudes. That would be a Golgari card. So March of the Multitudes is a really strong card. The idea behind this deck is you just get out a whole bunch of little wieners. It does have answers in terms of the Tribunal. This is something you can use to take out your opponent's permanents, and there's not much in way of enchantment destruction in the majority of decks. So this is a pretty decent card. Overall, the idea is to just get out a whole bunch of little donks. Use things like Amara to get out more donks with your Convoke. It's got some alright cards. I mean, you've got Venerated Loxodon, and I suppose Tolsimir could be okay, but I mean, they didn't really load the deck down with any number of wolves, right? I'm pretty sure this is the only wolf card in the deck, and that's kind of underwhelming for a rare when you compare it to some of the rares some of the other decks get. So this one for me is a lower ranker for sure. Moving on, we've got the Grawl Clans. Now this deck is really just about trying to beef smash your opponent. This thing can't handle your opponent's creatures unless you have bigger creatures in them. The idea is just use like Giant Growths and things like your Collision and Colossus to make your creatures big enough to smash through. You can use Rhythm of Wild to make your creatures bigger or give them haste. It does have a card I really like in the form of Endrace Forerunners. This guy is amazing. This guy's a game ender right here. You can send in a squad and do some insane amounts of damage with him. I use him in my big green tower deck, so I like him. And Ravager Worm is pretty decent as well. Although admittedly, destroying target land with an activated ability that's not a mana ability isn't really relevant in this event. So really, he's just, you can have him fight something when he comes out. And the fact that it's got Riot, for 6 mana, it's not too shabby. But this deck is one of the mid-level decks. It's really, really going to depend on your ability to keep out big creatures on the board. It's all going to hinge around that. Moving on to the next, we have the Boros Legion deck. This one seems pretty decent. This is built on Mentor, where you pump other creatures by having creatures that are bigger and giving them +1/+1 counters. I really like Goblin Banneret, and there's enough Mentor in this deck that it feels like it's got a good chance. You've got Goblin Banneret, you've got Sunhome Stalwart, you've got Boros Challenger, you also have, where is he? I saw him in here. Tajic. You've you've got Tajik. Tajik's amazing, and he will shut down your opponent's burn as well. So you've got Tajik. What is going on with his sword? I never noticed that his sword has jet blasts coming out of it. But either way, he's a beefcake mentor with haste, and he's got 3 power for 3 mana. You've also got Aurelia. Aurelia's ability combos really well with Mentor, and just on her own, she's an incredibly solid card for what you get for 4 mana. And the fact that they slapped Mentor on her as well, I always forget that she has Mentor. She's just that good. So this deck overall is all right. I admittedly, Light of the Legion is kind of an underwhelming rare, but at the same time, there aren't a ton of flyers in most of these decks. So this deck can have air superiority. So there is that, and it does have response, which can get really dumb. Response and the resurgence side of it, with all the mentor creatures taking an extra attack and getting first strike, is kind of dumb because it gives all your creatures vigilance. So you can play it before your first attack. You're going to get to attack twice and have first strike. So overall, this deck is in the higher range. I think it's got some potential to it. Now, this deck right here, the Dimir deck, seems like it's actually going to be the most obnoxious deck to play against, and it looks like it can handle a fair range of situations. It's got things like Thought Erasure to make your opponent discard things from their hands. It's got bounce. You can bounce or destroy your opponent's creatures with a number of different spells. It's got Etrata, who can destroy any creatures and can't be blocked. She is going to be really useful in this. I feel like you've got a fair bit of Surveil as well, so that you can smooth out your draws. Honestly, I think this might be the strongest deck. It's got the Doom Whisper and a 6/6 Flying Trampler backed up with the ability to strip answers out of your opponent's hand and bounce other threats. It genuinely feels like, looking at this deck before having played any of them, that this might actually be the best of the decks. I feel like it's right up there. If it's not the best, it's probably tied for the best. Now, the Izzet deck, when I took a look at the Izzet deck, it felt to me like it's kind of all over the place. It's just disparate parts. I get the idea is supposed to be that it's casting instants and sorceries are supposed to be your deal, because you've got electrostatic fields to do damage to your opponents when you cast them. You've got Goblin Electromancers to make them cheaper. You've got the Firemind's Research and the Murmuring Mystics and a couple of Crackling Drakes. But I don't know. The deck, like, you've got Thousand Year Storm, which could be gross, but you also have to pay 6 mana to get it out. And that's going to be slow rolling. So it does have some beef in the form of Niv Mizzet, but I feel like this is going to be one of the weaker decks that's really going to be draw dependent. I don't feel like this deck is going to have much in the way of consistency, personally. After that, we've got the Orzhov Syndicate. This is another deck